The dust cloud appeared on the horizon like an angry spirit, growing larger with each passing minute as the stagecoach rattled across the rugged terrain toward Palisade, Wyoming Territory. The year was 1873, and Theresa Jordan clutched her weathered valise with white knuckles as the wooden wheels beneath her bounced violently over every rock and rut. Unlike the other passengers who complained about the journey, she welcomed each jarring bump. It matched the tumultuous state of her heart. "First time out west, miss." The elderly woman beside her smiled kindly, her face a roadmap of wrinkles earned through decades under the harsh frontier sun. Theresa straightened her back, adjusting the simple bonnet that covered her auburn hair. "Yes, madam, I've come from Boston." She left unspoken the rest. That she'd sold nearly everything she owned for this one-way ticket, that she was responding to an advertisement seeking a bride, that the man who had promised to marry her had abruptly withdrawn his offer via telegram just yesterday when she was already halfway across the country. "Pretty thing like you will find plenty of suitors in Palisade," the woman continued, oblivious to Theresa's turmoil. "Not many unmarried ladies brave enough to make the journey." The stagecoach driver's voice boomed from above. "Palisade coming up, hold tight for the final stretch." Theresa peered through the small window. The town materialized from the dusty landscape, a main street lined with false-fronted buildings, a church steeple rising above the cluster of structures, horses hitched to posts. This remote outpost would have been her new home, with a husband she'd never met waiting to greet her. Now it was simply another unfamiliar place where she had no belongings, no connections, and rapidly dwindling funds. As the stagecoach lurched to a halt before the Palisade Hotel, Theresa took a deep breath. She may have been scorned, her prospective husband having changed his mind without so much as meeting her, but she wouldn't allow herself to crumble. Not yet, not in front of strangers. The driver opened the door and extended his hand to help the passengers down. When Theresa stepped onto Wyoming soil for the first time, the dry heat engulfed her immediately, so different from Boston's humid air. She stood uncertainly on the boardwalk, clutching her valise and the small carpetbag that contained everything she now possessed in the world. People hurried past, men in dusty hats and women in practical frontier dresses, so unlike the fashionable garments she'd left behind. No one spared her more than a curious glance. No one was waiting for her. The crushing reality of her situation threatened to overwhelm her. "Miss Jordan?" A deep voice broke through her swirling thoughts. Theresa turned to find a tall man regarding her with intense blue eyes beneath the brim of a well-worn hat. His face was tanned and weathered, his stance confident but not imposing. She didn't recognize him, yet somehow he knew her name. "Yes," she replied cautiously. "Samuel Easton." He touched the brim of his hat in greeting. "I work the Triple Creek Ranch outside of town." She nodded, unsure why this stranger was introducing himself. "I'm pleased to meet you, Mr. Easton, but I'm afraid He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I know about George Willard backing out of your arrangement. News travels fast, even by telegraph." Heat rushed to her cheeks, so everyone already knew of her humiliation. "I see," she managed, fighting to maintain her composure. "Well, if you'll excuse me, wait," he said, his expression unreadable. "I have a proposition for you." Before she could respond, a commotion erupted behind them. A portly man with an ostentatious vest pushed through the gathering crowd, his face flushed with either exertion or anger, possibly both. "There she is," he announced loudly, pointing at Theresa. "The Eastern woman who thinks she can trick decent men into marriage." Coming all this way when she knew perfectly well that George changed his mind, the crowd's murmurs grew louder. Theresa felt the blood drain from her face. "Sir, I received the telegram only yesterday when I was lies," the man shouted. "We don't need your kind in Palisade." Women thinking they can manipulate hard-working men with false pretenses. Samuel Easton stepped between Theresa and the red-faced accuser. His movement was casual but deliberate, creating a shield with his body. "That's enough, Hargrove," he said evenly. "You're making a scene over nothing." "Nothing? This woman is trying to force George into she's my wife," Samuel announced with quiet pride, his voice carrying just enough to be heard by those gathering around. "And I'd appreciate it if you'd stop insulting her." Theresa's jaw dropped in shock, but Samuel's steady hand at the small of her back prevented her from contradicting him. The crowd fell silent, their curious stares now mixed with confusion. "Your wife," Hargrove sputtered. "Since when are you married, Easton?" "Since I started corresponding with Miss Jordan here," Samuel replied smoothly. "George was helping arrange her travel when he realized she'd been writing to me all along. Simple misunderstanding." The explanation was preposterous, but Samuel delivered it with such calm confidence that Theresa saw doubt replacing suspicion in the onlookers' faces. "Is that true, miss?" an older woman asked, her eyes narrowed in scrutiny. Theresa felt Samuel's hand press gently against her back, a silent plea. She swallowed hard, knowing her next words would determine her immediate future. "Yes," she heard herself say. "Mr. Easton and I have been corresponding for some time. I apologize for any confusion my arrival has caused." Samuel's shoulders relaxed almost imperceptibly. "Now, if you'll excuse us, my wife has had a long journey. We'll be heading home now." Before anyone could raise further objections, he gathered her carpetbag in one hand and guided her toward a wagon parked nearby. Only when he helped her onto the seat did she find her voice again. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" she whispered furiously. He climbed up beside her, taking the reins. "Saving you from public humiliation and giving you a place to stay until you sort things out." He clicked his tongue and the horses began to move. "Unless you'd prefer I take you back to face Hargrove and his gossip." Theresa looked back at the crowd still watching them, then at the dusty road ahead. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." "I know enough," he replied, eyes fixed on the road. "I know George Willard is a coward for not facing you himself. I know Hargrove is a troublemaker who enjoys others' misfortune, and I know you're a woman of courage to come all this way alone." She studied his profile as the wagon rolled out of town, the straight nose, the firm jaw shadowed with stubble, the lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled more often than he frowned. There was something honest in his face that compelled her to trust him, despite the absurdity of the situation. "What happens now, Mr. Easton?" she asked finally. "Now," he said, turning to meet her gaze, "we figure out how to convince everyone that we're happily married, at least until you decide what you want to do next." The wagon continued down the dusty road, taking Theresa toward an uncertain future with a man who was still very much a stranger, yet had already altered the course of her life with 4 simple words: "She is my wife." The Triple Creek Ranch appeared on the horizon after an hour's journey from town. As they approached, Theresa took in the sprawling landscape, rolling grasslands dotted with cattle, a creek winding like a silver ribbon through the property, and a modest but well-built home nestled against a backdrop of distant mountains. "It's not what you're used to in Boston," Samuel said, noting her appraisal, "but it's solid. Built it myself 5 years ago." "It's lovely," she replied honestly. The house was simple, a 2-story wooden structure with a wide porch and shuttered windows, but there was care in its construction. Unlike the cramped tenement where she'd lived in Boston after her parents' deaths, this place had room to breathe. As they drew closer, a tall, lean man emerged from the barn, followed by a younger boy of perhaps 17. Both stared openly as Samuel brought the wagon to a halt. "Tom Levy," Samuel called, jumping down. "Come meet Mrs. Easton." Theresa almost corrected him before remembering their pretense. The men approached, confusion evident in their expressions. "Mrs. Easton." The older man, Tom, removed his hat, revealing salt and pepper hair. "Since when is there a Mrs. Easton?" Samuel helped Theresa down from the wagon with gentle hands. "Since I've been writing to Miss Theresa Jordan from Boston these past months." His tone carried a warning that Theresa recognized play along or ask questions later. "Madam," Tom nodded respectfully, though his eyes betrayed his bewilderment. "Tom Miller, foreman here at Triple Creek." The younger one, Levy, simply gaped until Tom elbowed him. "Pleased to meet you, madam," he stammered. "Levy Parker, I help with the horses." "A pleasure to meet you both," Theresa replied, summoning every ounce of composure her Boston upbringing had instilled in her. "I apologize for the surprise of my arrival. It seems my husband," the word felt foreign on her tongue, "wanted to keep our correspondence private." Samuel took her elbow, guiding her toward the house. "Tom, would you and Levy see to unloading Mrs. Easton's things? We've had a long journey." Once inside, with the door firmly closed behind them, Theresa rounded on him. "This is madness. Those men know perfectly well you weren't expecting a wife today. They're loyal," Samuel replied calmly, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. "They won't contradict us in public." The interior of the house was surprisingly comfortable. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, surrounded by sturdy but well-crafted furniture. Bookshelves lined another wall, filled with volumes that suggested Samuel Easton was more than just a cattle rancher. The floors were polished wood, partially covered by woven rugs, and large windows let in the afternoon light. "You live here alone?" she asked, momentarily distracted from her predicament. "Just me and Juniper," he nodded toward a calico cat curled on a chair cushion. "Tom has his own cabin near the south pasture, and Levy stays in the bunkhouse with the seasonal hands." Theresa walked to the window, watching Tom and Levy approach with her meager belongings. "Mr. Easton, while I appreciate your intervention in town, I cannot continue this charade. It's dishonest, and when people discover the truth, they won't need to," he interrupted. "Not if we're careful. Listen, Miss Jordan, I'm not suggesting this arrangement become permanent. Just give it a few weeks. Let the gossip die down, and then you can decide that frontier life isn't for you and return east with your reputation intact." "Return east to what?" The question escaped her before she could stop it. "I sold everything I had for this journey." Samuel's expression softened. "Then stay until you've saved enough to start fresh somewhere else. I have a spare room. You can keep house if you like. I'm not much for domestic matters or help with the accounts. I saw you noticing the books. You're educated." "I was a teacher," she admitted. "But that doesn't mean I can simply live here under false pretenses. People will expect certain things of a married couple." A hint of color touched his tan cheeks. "We'll cross those bridges when necessary. For now, let's just say I'm a respectful husband who understands his city-bred wife needs time to adjust to ranch life." A knock at the door interrupted them. Tom entered with her valise, his expression carefully neutral. "Where should I put Mrs. Easton's things, boss?" Samuel glanced at Theresa, then pointed toward a staircase. "The blue room. It has the morning light." After Tom departed, Theresa sank into a chair. "This is absurd. I don't know the first thing about being a rancher's wife. I've never even cooked over a wood stove." "Mrs. Miller brings food over twice a week," Samuel said. "She'll teach you what you need to know if you're willing to learn, and I expect most folks will be understanding of a new bride from the city." "Why are you doing this?" she asked again, searching his face for hidden motives. "What do you gain from this arrangement?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment, looking past her to the window where the sun was beginning to sink toward the distant mountains. "Palisade is a small town, Miss Jordan. People talk, judge, remember. I've built something here, not just this ranch, but a reputation. When a man says he'll do something, he does it. And you've said I'm your wife," she concluded, beginning to understand. He nodded. "I've said it, so now I need to honor it at least for a while. Maybe I also couldn't stand to see Hargrove humiliate you in front of the entire town. Maybe I recognized something in your eyes when you stepped off that stagecoach." "And what was that?" she asked softly. "Determination," he replied, meeting her gaze. "The same thing I felt when I first came here with nothing but 2 horses and a dream of something that was mine. You didn't cry or collapse when you realized your intended husband had abandoned you. You stood straight and faced it." For the first time since receiving George Willard's telegram, Theresa felt something other than despair. This Samuel Easton had seen strength in her when she'd felt weakest. "I'll stay," she decided, "just until the gossip dies down and I can figure out my next steps." "But we need rules, Mr. Easton, clear boundaries." "Sam," he corrected her. "If you're my wife, you should use my given name at least when others are present." "Sam," she repeated, the single syllable strangely intimate. "And I'm Theresa or Tess to those who know me well." Something shifted in his expression. "Tess," he said, as if testing how it felt. "Welcome to Triple Creek Ranch, Tess, for however long you choose to stay." The sun cast long shadows across the yard as they sealed their unusual arrangement, with nothing more than a handshake and names exchanged, the beginning of a marriage that wasn't one, between 2 people who were still strangers, yet somehow already entangled in each other's futures. The first week passed in a blur of adjustments. Theresa, now answering to Mrs. Easton in public, found herself learning the rhythms of ranch life with surprising enthusiasm. Mrs. Miller, Tom's wife, proved an invaluable teacher, patiently showing Theresa how to manage the temperamental wood stove, preserve fruits from the small orchard behind the house, and keep a frontier household running smoothly. "You're catching on quick for a city girl," Martha Miller remarked one afternoon as they hung laundry on the line behind the house. "Most Eastern ladies would be crying for their maids by now." Theresa smiled, pinning one of Sam's shirts to the line. "I never had maids. My father was a schoolteacher, and after he and my mother passed, I lived quite modestly." Martha's weathered face softened. "Samuel didn't mention you were an orphan. That explains some things." "What things?" Theresa asked, curious. "Why you'd marry a man you barely knew and travel all this way," Martha replied matter-of-factly. "No family to leave behind." Guilt pricked at Theresa's conscience. The story they'd concocted involved a brief courtship through letters, arranged by a mutual acquaintance. Each day that passed made their deception feel heavier, especially as the Millers and young Levy Parker had been nothing but kind to her. "Yes, well," she said, changing the subject, "I've found that life offers unexpected turns. Sometimes one must simply forge ahead." Martha nodded approvingly. "That's the spirit that built the West. Speaking of which, the town social is this Saturday, first chance for folks to meet Samuel's mysterious bride properly." Theresa nearly dropped the damp sheet she was hanging. "A social so soon?" Pastor Donovan holds one the first Saturday of every month. "Music, dancing, food, everyone attends. You can't hide out at Triple Creek forever, my dear." That evening, after Martha had departed with a basket of fresh eggs as payment for her tutelage, Theresa confronted Sam as he returned from checking the herd in the north pasture. "You didn't tell me about the social," she said, as he removed his dusty boots at the door, a habit she'd insisted upon after her first day cleaning the plank floors. "What social?" He looked genuinely confused, accepting the cup of coffee she'd learned to prepare just as he liked it strong enough, he joked, to float a horseshoe. "The town gathering this Saturday. Martha says everyone will be there, expecting to meet your bride." Understanding dawned on his face. "Pastor Donovan's monthly social. I'd forgotten it was coming up." "How could you forget? This will be our first public appearance as a married couple." She paced the kitchen, agitated. "People will expect certain behaviors, certain familiarity between us. What if they realize we're strangers?" Sam sipped his coffee, watching her over the rim of the cup. "We're not exactly strangers anymore, Tess." He was right, she realized. In just a week, they'd established routines together. She knew he rose before dawn, that he hummed under his breath when he thought no one could hear, that he had a weakness for apple pie but wouldn't admit it. He knew she was afraid of thunderstorms, that she read voraciously from his modest library, that she talked to the cat as if Juniper could understand every word. "Still," she insisted, "we need to agree on our story, how we met, when we decided to marry, why we kept it secret." "Simple," he replied, setting down his cup. "We tell as much truth as possible. My cousin in Boston, that part's true. I do have family there, introduced us through letters. We corresponded for several months. When you mentioned wanting to leave Boston after losing your teaching position, I proposed." "And the secrecy," she pressed. "I wanted to surprise the town with my good fortune," he said with a small smile, "not entirely unbelievable for a private man like me." Theresa tried to ignore the warmth that spread through her at his words. It was just part of their fiction, she reminded herself. "And what about physical affection? People will expect a newly married couple to show some attachment." Now it was Sam's turn to look uncomfortable. "I suppose a certain amount of closeness would be expected. Exactly, we should practice." "Practice?" His eyebrows rose. "Not, I didn't mean," Theresa felt heat rise to her face. "Just small things, standing close, perhaps your hand at my waist, the sort of unconscious touches married people share." Sam considered this, then extended his hand. "Come here." Heart suddenly pounding, Theresa moved closer. He took her hand, his much larger one enveloping hers completely. "This is acceptable?" he asked, his voice lower than before. She nodded, unable to speak as he gently pulled her closer until she stood directly before him, close enough to smell the lingering scent of prairie grass and horses on his clothing. "And this?" His hand moved to her waist, resting there lightly. Yes, she managed, acutely aware of the warmth of his palm through the fabric of her dress. That would appear convincingly affectionate. His eyes, bluer than she'd initially realized, held hers. What about this? He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers brushing her cheek. The simple touch sent a tremor through her that had nothing to do with their pretense. I think that would be sufficient, she whispered. For a moment they stood frozen in the warm kitchen, the air between them charged with something neither had anticipated. Then Juniper jumped onto the table with a soft thud, breaking the spell. Theresa stepped back quickly, smoothing her skirts. Well, I believe we've established the boundaries of public affection. Sam cleared his throat, reaching for his coffee cup again. Indeed. Nothing inappropriate, just enough to be convincing. Precisely. She turned away, busying herself with dinner preparations to hide the flush she knew colored her cheeks. I should mention I've been going through your ledgers. My ledgers? He sounded surprised at the abrupt change of subject. You said I might help with the accounts. I noticed some discrepancies in the cattle sales from last spring. You've been undercharging the Palisade Mercantile for beef. Sam frowned. Are you certain? I taught mathematics, Mr. Easton. She retrieved the ledger from a shelf and opened it on the table, pointedly ignoring how close he stood as he leaned over to examine her neat annotations. See here, and here. The Mercantile paid 10% less than your other buyers for the same grade of beef. He studied the figures, then let out a low whistle. You're right, I never noticed. He looked at her with new appreciation. You have a good eye for numbers. It's a simple matter of attention to detail, she replied, though his praise pleased her more than it should have. You should speak to the Mercantile owner about paying the difference. That would be Vernon Hargrove, Sam said with a grimace. The same Hargrove who accused me of trying to trick George Willard. Theresa's back straightened. In that case, I believe he owes you quite a substantial sum. Sam's laugh was unexpected and rich. Tess Jordan Easton, I believe you might be exactly what Triple Creek Ranch needed. The Jordan Easton made her breath catch the casual combining of their names as if they truly belonged together. The ease with which he said it, and the warmth in his eyes as he looked at her, sent an unwelcome flutter through her stomach. This was dangerous territory, she realized. Their arrangement was temporarily a convenient solution to her immediate problems and his impulsive declaration. Allowing genuine feelings to develop would only complicate matters when the time came for her to leave. And she would leave, she reminded herself firmly. Once she had saved enough money and the gossip had died down, she would thank Samuel Easton for his kindness and move on with her life. But as she watched him return to the ledger, his brow furrowed in concentration as he recalculated the figures she'd identified, she couldn't help wondering what it might be like if this weren't all pretense, if she truly were the mistress of Triple Creek Ranch, and he truly were her husband. Such thoughts were pointless, she chided herself, turning back to the stove. Their marriage existed only in words spoken to appease a judgmental town. No matter how comfortable their daily routines became, no matter how naturally they learned to move in each other's spaces, reality remained unchanged. She was a mail-order bride who had been scorned, and he was a rancher who had claimed her as his wife out of some misplaced sense of chivalry. Nothing more. Yet as they sat down to dinner that evening, discussing the upcoming social and how they would present themselves to the town, Theresa couldn't quite silence the small voice in her heart that whispered, "But what if it could be more?" Saturday arrived with alarming swiftness. Theresa stood before the small mirror in her bedroom, what Sam called the blue room, for its faded blue wallpaper, studying her appearance with critical eyes. She wore her best dress, a deep green wool that she'd carefully brushed and pressed the night before. It wasn't the height of Boston fashion, but it was respectable enough for a country social. Her auburn hair was twisted into a neat chignon, though a few stubborn tendrils had already escaped to frame her face. She'd pinched her cheeks for color and dabbed a tiny amount of rosewater at her wrists, a luxury she'd found tucked away in a drawer, still in its original paper wrapping, as if someone had purchased it long ago but never used it. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her contemplation. "Tess. The wagon's ready whenever you are." She opened the door to find Sam waiting in the hallway, and her breath caught involuntarily. Gone were the practical work clothes she'd grown accustomed to seeing him in. Instead, he wore a crisp white shirt, dark vest, and what appeared to be newly pressed trousers. His hair, usually tousled from his hat, was neatly combed, and he'd trimmed his beard to a clean edge along his jaw. "You look," she began, then faltered. "Uncomfortable," he finished with a wry smile, tugging at his collar. "Tom insisted I make an effort for my first public appearance as a married man." "I was going to say handsome," she admitted, then immediately wished she could retract the word when she saw surprise flicker across his face. "That is suitable. You look very suitable for the occasion," his expression softened. "And you look beautiful, Tess. That color brings out your eyes." The compliment, delivered so simply, warmed her from within. "Thank you. Shall we go, then?" "I believe a married couple of several months shouldn't be fashionably late." He offered his arm, and she took it, feeling the solid strength of him through the fabric of his shirt. As they descended the stairs together, she realized this was the first time they would truly be testing their charade before the entire town. The thought sent a flutter of nerves through her stomach. "Remember," Sam said quietly as they approached the wagon, "just be yourself. The only lie is how we met and when we married. Everything else, who you are, what you believe, how you feel, that's all truth." She nodded, appreciating his reassurance. "And if someone asks about Boston or my family, tell them about your parents, your teaching. Just leave out the part about George Willard's advertisement." The journey to town was quiet, both lost in thoughts of the evening ahead. As they approached Palisade, Theresa could see lanterns illuminating the church grounds, where tables had been set up beneath the trees. A fiddle player was already tuning his instrument on a small platform, while women arranged dishes on long tables covered with checkered cloths. Sam helped her down from the wagon, his hand lingering at her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary. "Ready, Mrs. Easton," he murmured, loud enough only for her to hear. "As I'll ever be, Mr. Easton," she replied with a small smile. Their entrance did not go unnoticed. Conversations paused as heads turned to observe the newcomers. Theresa felt the weight of curious stares, heard the whispers begin almost immediately. She straightened her spine, years of standing before classrooms of unruly children giving her the courage to face this scrutiny. Martha Miller was the first to approach, her round face beaming. "There you are. I was beginning to think you might not come." She embraced Theresa warmly, then nodded approvingly at Sam. "You clean up nicely, Samuel. Almost didn't recognize you without the dust." Sam's hand found the small of Theresa's back. "Where should we put our contribution?" He held up a basket containing one of Theresa's apple pies, her third attempt, after the first two had been deemed educational experiences rather than edible desserts. "Right over with the other sweets," Martha directed. "Then come meet everyone properly." The whole town's been dying to meet the woman who finally caught Samuel Easton. As they made their way to the dessert table, Theresa felt Sam's breath warm against her ear. "You're doing fine," he whispered. "Just breathe." The next hour passed in a whirl of introductions. Theresa met the blacksmith and his wife, the schoolteacher, a spinster named Miss Holcomb, who eyed Theresa with particular interest upon learning of her teaching background. The banker, the doctor, and dozens of ranch families from the surrounding area. Most seemed genuinely pleased to welcome her, though she detected undercurrents of curiosity, and from some of the unmarried women, barely concealed disappointment that one of the territory's most eligible bachelors was now officially taken. Pastor Donovan, a tall man with kind eyes and prematurely white hair, clasped her hand warmly. "Mrs. Easton, what a delight to have you in our community. I hope we'll see you at services tomorrow." "Of course," she replied, though she and Sam hadn't actually discussed attending church. "We wouldn't miss it." "Excellent. Perhaps afterward you might consider joining the Ladies' Aid Society. They meet on Tuesday afternoons and they're always eager for new members." Before she could respond, a familiar figure approached Vernon Hargrove, the mercantile owner who had confronted her on her arrival. His smile didn't reach his eyes as he nodded curtly to Sam. "Easton. Finally decided to join civilization for an evening, Hargrove." Sam's voice remained pleasant, though Theresa felt his posture stiffen beside her. "I believe you've met my wife." Hargrove's gaze slid to Theresa, assessment in his small eyes. "Indeed. Welcome to Palisade, Mrs. Easton. I trust you're finding our humble town acceptable after Boston's refinements." "Palisade has been most welcoming," she replied evenly. Though I understand the mercantile might improve its accounting practices, my husband mentioned some discrepancies in your business transactions. Sam's hand tightened slightly at her waist, a warning she ignored. Hargrove's face flushed. Business matters aren't typically discussed at social gatherings, Mrs. Easton, nor are they generally considered women's concerns. Is that so? Theresa smiled sweetly. How interesting. In Boston, accurate mathematics is considered important regardless of one's gender. But perhaps standards differ here in Wyoming. Before Hargrove could respond, the fiddle struck up a lively tune, and Sam smoothly guided Theresa away. I believe this is our dance, he said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. I didn't know we were dancing, she whispered as he led her toward the area cleared for that purpose. We are now, he murmured back. It was either that or watch you verbally eviscerate the most influential merchant in town within your first hour of public appearance. He deserved it, she insisted as they took their positions for the reel. He's been cheating you. Sam's eyes crinkled at the corners. Defending my honor already, people will definitely believe you're my wife. The music swelled, and conversation became impossible as they joined the other couples in the intricate patterns of the dance. Theresa had learned such dances in school, though it had been years since she'd practiced. Sam, surprisingly, moved with confidence and grace, guiding her through the figures with a sure hand. When the reel ended and a slower waltz began, he drew her closer, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers. Is this all right? He asked quietly. She nodded, acutely aware of his proximity, the warmth of his palm against her back, the faint scent of soap and leather that she'd come to associate with him. They moved together with unexpected harmony, as if they'd danced this way countless times before. Everyone's watching us, she observed, glimpsing the curious faces surrounding the dance area. Let them, Sam replied. They're seeing exactly what we want them to see, a man dancing with his wife. And what do you see? The question slipped out before she could stop it. His blue eyes held hers, something unreadable in their depths. I see a woman of remarkable courage and intelligence who deserves far better than the hand fate has dealt her. The simple honesty in his voice touched something deep within her. Sam, isn't this a touching scene? The cold voice cut through their moment. George Willard stood at the edge of the dance floor, his thin face twisted in a sneer. The mail-order bride has found herself a husband after all. Conversations around them faltered. The fiddle played on, but couples nearby slowed their dancing, straining to hear. Sam's arm tightened protectively around Theresa's waist. Willard, he acknowledged, his voice neutral despite the tension evident in his jaw. Didn't expect to see you here tonight. Clearly not, Willard replied, his gaze fixed on Theresa. I wonder what your new husband thinks of your arrangement with me, or perhaps he doesn't know. Theresa felt the blood drain from her face. This was exactly the scenario they'd hoped to avoid: direct confrontation with the man who had rejected her, who could expose their deception with a few well-chosen words. I know everything I need to about my wife, Sam said evenly. Including how fortunate I am that you changed your mind about marrying her. Willard's eyes narrowed. Is that what she told you, that I changed my mind? Did she mention the conditions of our agreement, the money her father owed mine? Theresa stiffened. That's a lie. My father never borrowed money from anyone. Not directly, no, Willard smirked. But gambling debts are debts nonetheless, Mrs. Easton, or should I say Miss Jordan? The music had stopped entirely now. Theresa was acutely aware of the crowd that had gathered around them, hanging on every word of this unexpected drama. My father was not a gambler, she insisted, though uncertainty crept into her voice. Her father had died suddenly when she was 20, leaving their financial affairs in disarray. She'd attributed it to poor management, never suspecting there might be hidden debts. Ask her why she really answered my advertisement, Willard continued, addressing Sam but looking at the gathering crowd. Ask her about the letter promising to forgive her father's debts if she agreed to come west as my bride. That's enough, Willard. Sam's voice had hardened to steel. Whatever arrangement you think you had with Miss Jordan before our marriage is irrelevant now. She's my wife, and you're causing a scene at a community gathering. Pastor Donovan stepped forward, his expression concerned. Perhaps this discussion would be better continued privately, gentlemen. Willard ignored him. I'm simply warning a fellow rancher about the woman he's taken into his home. She's not what she appears to be." Before Sam could respond, Theresa stepped forward, her cheeks burning but her voice steady. "Mr. Willard, I answered your advertisement in good faith. If my father owed your family money, I was unaware of it. You withdrew your offer after I'd already sold everything I owned and traveled halfway across the country." She took a deep breath, feeling Sam's supportive presence behind her. "Fortunately, fate had better plans for me than becoming your wife." A murmur ran through the crowd. Martha Miller stepped up beside Theresa, linking their arms in a show of solidarity. "I think we've all heard enough, George Willard. You embarrass yourself and our community with these accusations." Other women nodded, moving closer to Theresa. Even Vernon Hargrove looked uncomfortable with Willard's public attack. Willard's face darkened with anger. "You'll regret this, Easton, both of you." He turned and stalked away, pushing roughly through the gathered onlookers. In the awkward silence that followed, Sam placed his hand gently on Theresa's shoulder. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though she felt shaken to her core. "I'm fine." Pastor Donovan cleared his throat. "I believe the musicians were in the middle of a lovely waltz," he announced. "Shall we continue our celebration?" Slowly, the crowd dispersed. The fiddle resumed its tune and couples returned to dancing, though Theresa could feel curious glances still directed their way. "Perhaps we should go," she whispered to Sam. He shook his head. "That's exactly what Willard wants, to drive you away in shame. We'll stay, dance, eat, and show everyone that his accusations mean nothing to us." But what if he's right? The question that had been haunting her since Willard's outburst finally escaped. What if my father did owe his family money? Sam's expression softened. "Then we'll face that together if necessary, but not tonight." He extended his hand. "Tonight, Mrs. Easton, I believe I promised you a dance." With a grateful smile, Theresa took his hand and allowed him to lead her back to the dance floor. As they resumed their waltz, she felt the tension slowly easing from her shoulders. Whatever truth lay behind Willard's accusations, whatever complications their pretend marriage might face, in this moment she was simply a woman dancing with a man who had defended her honor without hesitation. And for now, that was enough. The ride home from the social was quiet, the wagon's wheels crunching over the packed dirt road as stars blazed overhead in the clear Wyoming night. Theresa sat beside Sam, their shoulders occasionally brushing with the wagon's movement, each lost in their own thoughts. "You think they believed us?" she finally asked, breaking the silence. Sam considered this, his profile sharp against the night sky. "I think most did. Those who matter anyway. And George Willard, what will he do now? Hard to say." Sam's hands were steady on the reins. Willard's always been more talk than action, but his accusations tonight. "About my father's debts," Theresa said softly. "I truly didn't know, Sam. If my father did borrow money from the Willards, he never spoke of it. I believe you." The simple statement, spoken without hesitation, warmed her more than the shawl around her shoulders. "Question is, does Willard actually have proof of these debts, or was he just trying to humiliate you?" "I don't know. My father handled all our financial matters. After he died, there was barely enough to pay for his funeral and my mother's care until she passed the following winter." She stared at her gloved hands in her lap. "I always assumed his medical expenses had depleted our savings." Sam was quiet for a long moment. "Would you want to know if Willard does have evidence, I mean?" "Yes," she said firmly. "I need to know the truth, even if it's painful. Then I'll find out," he promised, discreetly. They lapsed into silence again as the wagon crested a hill, revealing the dark silhouette of Triple Creek Ranch in the distance. A single lantern burned in the kitchen window. Tom's wife must have lit it before leaving, knowing they would return late. "Despite Willard's interruption, I enjoyed this evening," Theresa admitted. "Your neighbors are kind people." "They seem to take to you," Sam agreed. "Especially Martha Miller. She couldn't stop telling everyone how quickly you've adapted to ranch life." "I've had a good teacher." Theresa smiled, remembering Martha's patient instruction. "And a patient husband." The word still felt strange on her tongue, especially here in the darkness where pretense seemed unnecessary. Yet something had shifted between them tonight, in the way Sam had held her while they danced, in the fierceness with which he had defended her, in the unspoken understanding that had passed between them when Willard had made his accusations. "Tess," Sam began, his voice low. "There's something I should tell you." The serious note in his tone made her turn to him. "What is it?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "It can wait until morning. You've had enough surprises for one night." Curiosity piqued. She was about to press him further when the wagon suddenly lurched to one side. Sam cursed, pulling hard on the reins as the horses whinnied in alarm. The wagon tilted precariously, then settled with a cracking sound. What happened? Theresa clutched the seat as Sam secured the reins. Wheel caught something, a rock or a hole. He jumped down to inspect the damage, disappearing into the darkness beside the wagon. After a moment, his voice came from below. "Wheels damaged, the rims split. Can it be repaired?" "Not here, not tonight." He reappeared beside her. "We'll have to walk the rest of the way. It's only about a mile." Theresa gazed down at her best shoes, already anticipating the blisters, but there was no help for it. She accepted Sam's hand and climbed carefully down from the tilted wagon. "What about the horses?" she asked as he unhitched them from the damaged vehicle. "I'll lead them. They'll be glad for the rest anyway." He secured their bridles, then offered Theresa his arm. "Stay close to me, the path can be tricky in the dark." They set off slowly, the horses following behind. The night had grown cooler, and Theresa drew her shawl tighter around her shoulders. The moon provided just enough light to see the path, though Sam seemed to know every inch by memory, guiding her around unseen obstacles with a gentle hand at her elbow. "I'm sorry about your wagon," she said after they'd walked in silence for several minutes. "Don't be, it's easily repaired." He glanced at her. "How are your feet holding up?" "They've been better," she admitted, wincing as a small stone found its way through the thin sole of her dress shoes. Without warning, Sam stopped. "This isn't working. Here, hold the horses a moment." Confused, Theresa took the leads while Sam moved to the side of the path, searching for something. He returned with a sturdy branch, which he quickly trimmed with his pocket knife. "A walking stick," he explained, offering it to her. "It's not much, but it might help." The thoughtful gesture touched her deeply. "Thank you." They continued more comfortably, though the walk still seemed endless. When Triple Creek finally came into view, its solid shape a welcome sight against the star-strewn sky, Theresa nearly wept with relief. "Almost there," Sam encouraged, taking the horses' leads back from her. As they approached the house, Theresa noticed the lantern in the kitchen window had burned out. The ranch was completely dark. "That's odd," Sam murmured, his pace slowing. "The lamp should have had oil for hours yet." Something in his tone made Theresa uneasy. Perhaps the wind blew it out, perhaps, but he didn't sound convinced. "Wait here with the horses." "Sam, just for a moment," he insisted, his voice low. "Something's not right." Before she could protest further, he moved silently toward the house. His hand going to the pistol he wore beneath his vest, a precaution she hadn't even realized he'd taken for the social. Theresa stood frozen beside the horses, straining to see in the darkness as Sam disappeared around the side of the house. Minutes passed with agonizing slowness. The horses shifted restlessly, sensing her tension. Just as she was about to disregard Sam's instructions and follow him, a crash sounded from inside the house, followed by a muffled shout, heart-pounding. Theresa tied the horses to a nearby fence post and hurried toward the house, caution forgotten in her fear for Sam's safety. She approached the front door, which stood slightly ajar, and peered inside. The main room was dark, but she could make out shadows moving, the sounds of a struggle. A lamp was overturned on the floor, its oil spreading in a dark pool across the wooden planks. "Sam." She called, her voice betraying her fear. "Tess, stay back." His warning came from somewhere in the darkness, followed by the sound of a fist connecting with flesh. Ignoring his command, Theresa felt her way along the wall to where she knew matches were kept. Finding them, she struck one against the rough surface, illuminating the scene before her. Sam was grappling with a man she recognized, instantly George Willard. They crashed against the table as she watched, sending books and papers flying. Neither man appeared armed, though Willard's face was already bloodied from what must have been Sam's first blow. "Get out," Theresa commanded, her teacher's voice returning in full force. "Get out of our home this instant, Mr. Willard." Both men turned at her voice. In that moment of distraction, Willard broke free of Sam's grip and lunged toward Theresa. What happened next occurred so quickly she could barely process it. Sam moved faster than she would have thought possible, intercepting Willard before he could reach her. There was a sickening crack as Sam's fist connected with Willard's jaw, and the man crumpled to the floor unconscious. "Are you hurt?" Sam was instantly at her side, his hands gentle as they clasped her shoulders. "No, I'm fine, but you're bleeding." She touched his cheek, where a cut had opened below his right eye. "It's nothing," he dismissed, though he didn't pull away from her touch. "I told you to wait outside, and I chose not to listen," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. What was he doing here? Sam's expression hardened as he looked at the unconscious man on their floor. "Waiting for us, apparently. I found him going through my desk, looking for something." "The deed to the ranch," Theresa guessed, remembering Willard's animosity at the social, maybe. "Or something to prove our marriage isn't legitimate." Sam lit another lamp, properly this time, illuminating the disarray of the room. "We need to get the sheriff. At this hour, he won't thank you for waking him." "Can't be helped. Breaking and entering is a serious crime out here." Sam knelt to check that Willard was still breathing, then efficiently bound the man's hands with a length of rope from the kitchen. "I'll ride into town. Will you be all right here alone?" Theresa looked at Willard's unconscious form and felt a surprising lack of fear. "I'll be fine." He won't be waking up anytime soon, from the look of it. Sam's mouth twitched in what might have been pride. "Keep the shotgun nearby, just in case." He indicated the weapon mounted above the fireplace. "It's loaded." "I've never fired a gun," she admitted. "Point and pull the trigger." "But only if he wakes up and threatens you." Sam hesitated, then added, "I'm sorry, Tess, I never thought he'd go this far." "This isn't your fault," she insisted. "You couldn't have known." He nodded, though he didn't look convinced. "I'll be as quick as I can." He moved toward the door, then paused, turning back to her. "What I was going to tell you earlier, before the wagon broke, it can wait until you return," she interrupted gently. "Go before he wakes up." With a last concerned look, Sam departed. Theresa heard him outside, speaking softly to calm the horses, then the sound of hoofbeats as he rode toward town. Alone in the lamp-lit house, she took stock of the situation. George Willard lay motionless on the floor, blood from his nose staining the collar of his shirt. Papers were scattered across the room, and several books had fallen from their shelves. The desk drawer hung open, its contents in disarray. Moving cautiously around Willard's prone form, Theresa began gathering the scattered papers. Most were ranch documents, receipts, contracts, correspondence with cattle buyers. But one envelope caught her eye, addressed in handwriting she recognized immediately. Her father's handwriting. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope and withdrew a single sheet of paper. The letter was dated just weeks before her father's death, addressed to Samuel Easton. "My dear nephew," it began, "I write with heavy heart to inform you of my declining health." "Nephew," the word seemed to leap from the page. She read on, disbelieving, as her father described his illness and expressed regret that they had lost touch over the years. He mentioned Theresa, his pride in her teaching career, his worry for her future. And he asked Sam, his sister's son, to look out for her if circumstances permitted. "She is strong-willed and independent," her father had written, "but I fear for her alone in this world. If you could find it in your heart to offer her guidance should she ever need it, I would go to my rest with greater peace." Theresa sank into a chair, the letter clutched in her hand. Sam was her cousin. Her father had written to him before his death, had asked him to watch over her, and Sam had never said a word. Pieces began falling into place: how he'd known her name when she arrived in Palisade, his immediate offer of protection, his insistence that she stay at Triple Creek until she sorted things out. It hadn't been random chance or simple chivalry. He had recognized her name and fulfilled a promise to her father. The realization brought a complicated mixture of emotions: relief that Willard's insinuations about her father's gambling debts might be false, anger that Sam had kept this connection secret, and a strange, hollow feeling that their growing closeness had been motivated by family obligation rather than genuine regard. When Sam returned an hour later with Sheriff Rollins, a gruff man with a silver mustache and weathered face, Theresa had composed herself. The letter was tucked into her pocket, her expression carefully neutral as she explained what had happened. Willard had regained consciousness and sat sullenly in the corner, guarded by Sam while the sheriff questioned Theresa. When they finally departed, Willard in custody and warned sternly against further trouble, an awkward silence descended on the house. Sam moved to the fireplace, stoking the dying embers. You should get some rest. It's been a long night. I found the letter, Theresa said quietly. From my father. His movements stilled. Slowly, he straightened and turned to face her. I was going to tell you tonight. Were you? She couldn't keep the edge from her voice. After weeks of pretending to be my husband, you were finally going to mention that we're actually related. Second cousins, he corrected. Your father was my mother's cousin, not her brother. I never met him. The letter arrived after he died, forwarded from my previous address. By then, you were established in Boston with your teaching position. So you just, filed the letter away and forgot about it? The hurt in her voice was unmistakable. Sam ran a hand through his hair, disheveled from the fight. No, I wrote to you at the address he provided, but the letter came back unopened. The landlady said you'd moved and left no forwarding address. I tried twice more over the next year, then gave up. He met her gaze directly. Until you stepped off that stagecoach and Hargrove called you by name. You recognized me then, she realized. That's why you intervened. Yes. And our whole marriage charade that was just you fulfilling your promise to my father, taking care of his orphaned daughter. The thought brought a fresh wave of pain. She had begun to believe there might be something genuine growing between them, something beyond their convenient arrangement. At first, Sam admitted, his voice low. But Tess, these past weeks, I think I've had enough revelations for one night, she interrupted, rising from her chair. If you'll excuse me, I'm very tired. Tess, please. He stepped toward her but stopped when she raised a hand. We'll talk tomorrow, she said firmly, though her voice trembled slightly. Good night, Mr. Easton. She climbed the stairs to the blue room, closing the door behind her with a decisive click. Only then did she allow the tears to come, silent and hot, spilling down her cheeks as she sank onto the edge of the bed. Everything had changed in a single evening. The fragile trust she'd built with Sam, her understanding of her father's final days, her place in this house she'd begun to think of as home. She felt adrift again, just as she had stepping off that stagecoach weeks ago. Through the floor, she could hear Sam moving below, cleaning up the evidence of the struggle with Willard, putting things back in their proper places. The sounds were familiar now, comforting despite her turmoil. Whatever his initial motivations, he had been kind to her, had defended her, had given her a safe place when she had nowhere else to go. But he had also deceived her, had allowed her to believe they were strangers when all along he'd known exactly who she was. How could she trust anything between them now? Dawn was breaking when exhaustion finally claimed her, still fully dressed atop the quilt. Her father's letter clutched in her hand like a talisman from a past she thought she'd understood. The next morning brought no clarity. Theresa woke late, her head pounding from too little sleep and too many tears. She washed and dressed mechanically, steeling herself for the conversation that awaited her downstairs, but the house was empty when she descended. A note on the kitchen table, written in Sam's neat hand, explained that he'd gone to town to give his statement to the sheriff and arrange repairs for the wagon. He'd return by midday, grateful for the reprieve. Theresa made herself tea and toast, then set about restoring order to the house. The physical activity helped calm her mind, giving her space to sort through the tumult of emotions from the previous night. By the time she heard hoofbeats in the yard some hours later, she had reached a decision. She would hear Sam out, understand his reasons for keeping their connection secret, and then decide her next steps. He entered looking weary, his hat in his hands, the cut below his eye now a dark bruise against his tanned skin. Sheriff's holding Willard until the circuit judge arrives next week, he reported. Found papers in his pocket, forged documents claiming your father owed his family money. Seems he was planning to use them to extort you. So it was all a lie, Theresa said, relief washing through her. My father never borrowed from the Willards. Never. Sam hung his hat on its accustomed peg. Willard saw an opportunity when you answered his advertisement, a woman alone with no family to contradict his claims. Except I did have family, she said quietly. I just didn't know it. Sam's expression softened. Tess, I should have told you from the beginning. I was wrong to keep it from you. Yes, you were. She motioned for him to sit at the kitchen table, taking the chair across from him. I want to understand why. He sat heavily, his broad shoulders slumping with fatigue or regret, perhaps both. When I recognized your name that day, I acted on instinct. Hargrove was humiliating you, and all I could think was that I'd promised your father I'd help if you ever needed it. So you claimed me as your wife, she prompted when he paused. It was impulsive, he admitted, but effective. After I planned to tell you about the letter, explain our connection, but then you agreed to stay to maintain our pretense, and it seemed complicated. She raised an eyebrow. I worried you might think I was only helping you out of obligation to your father, or worse, that you'd feel obligated to stay because we're family, however distant. He met her gaze directly. And then, as days passed, I found myself enjoying your company. The house felt different with you here. I felt different. Theresa's heart quickened at his words, but she kept her expression neutral. That still doesn't excuse your deception. No, it doesn't, he agreed simply. I was wrong and I'm sorry. If you want to leave Triple Creek, I'll understand. I'll help you get established wherever you choose to go. Is that what you want? She asked, studying his face. For me to leave? No, the single syllable held such conviction that it startled her. That's the last thing I want, Tess. Then what do you want? She pressed. The truth this time, Sam. He leaned forward, his blue eyes intent on hers. I want you to stay. Not as my pretend wife, not as a distant cousin I'm obligated to protect, but as yourself. Because these past weeks have shown me what Triple Creek could be, what my life could be with you in it. His honesty left her momentarily speechless. She had expected explanations, justifications, perhaps even defensive anger, not this raw vulnerability. I can't simply forget that you lied to me, she said finally. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight, I know that. He nodded, accepting her judgment. I'm asking for a chance to earn your trust again. No more secrets, no more pretending. And what about our arrangement? The town believes we're married. We could continue as we have been in public if you're willing, or, he hesitated, then forged ahead, or we could make it real. Theresa's breath caught. Real? Not immediately, he hastened to add. I wouldn't presume. That is, we barely know each other still. But perhaps in time, if you found you could forgive me, if you came to feel even a fraction of what I'm beginning to feel for you. And what is that exactly? She asked softly. Sam ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of his discomfort with expressing emotions. I'm not a man of many words, Tess, but when I think of you leaving Triple Creek, there's an emptiness I can't describe. It's not just the house that would feel hollow. It's everything. His awkward confession touched her more deeply than any flowery declaration could have. This was the real Samuel Easton, not the confident rancher who'd claimed her as his wife that first day, nor the dutiful relative fulfilling an obligation to her father, but a man struggling to articulate feelings he hadn't expected to develop. I need time, she said finally. Time to think, to decide what I want, he nodded, relief evident in his expression. It wasn't a rejection, at least. Take all the time you need, I'm not going anywhere, neither am I, she said. At least not yet. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely. But it was a beginning, a chance to start over with truth between them, to discover what might be possible once the pretense was stripped away. And for now, that was enough. In the days that followed, Triple Creek fell into a new rhythm. Sam and Theresa maintained their public facade of marriage while establishing more honest boundaries in private. They spoke more openly than before, sharing stories of their childhoods, their hopes, their disappointments. Slowly, Theresa began to know the real Samuel Easton, not just her pretend husband or distant relative, but the man himself. She learned that he'd left his family's small farm in Pennsylvania at 19, working his way west through a series of ranch jobs until he'd saved enough to purchase the struggling Triple Creek 5 years ago. He'd built it into a modest but successful operation through sheer determination and an uncanny understanding of cattle and land management. He learned about her years teaching in Boston's public schools, her dreams of someday opening her own small academy where children of all backgrounds could receive a quality education. She told him about losing her parents, about the loneliness that had made George Willard's advertisement seem like a lifeline. Their evenings often found them by the fire, Sam reading aloud from one of his books while Theresa mended clothing or worked on the ranch accounts, which she had taken over entirely. It was a companionable existence, comfortable in a way neither had experienced before. Yet there remained a careful distance between them, physical and emotional. The easy touches that had begun to develop during their charade now seemed weighted with new significance. Each brush of hands over the breakfast table, each accidental meeting of eyes across the room, carried unspoken questions neither was ready to answer. A month after the night of Willard's intrusion, Theresa received a letter from Miss Holcomb, Palisade's schoolteacher. "She's leaving at the end of the term," Theresa explained, reading the letter at the dinner table. "Her mother is ill in St. Louis and she needs to return east. She asks if I would consider taking her position." Sam looked up from his stew. "Would you want that? I'm not sure." Theresa folded the letter thoughtfully. "I've missed teaching, and it would mean I could contribute more substantially to the household." She still occasionally stumbled over such distinctions, the line between their pretend marriage and their actual arrangement sometimes blurring in everyday conversation. "You already contribute," Sam pointed out. "The ranch accounts haven't been this organized since, well, ever. And you've saved us from being cheated by Hargrove and 2 other buyers. Still, teaching is what I trained for, what I love." She hesitated. "But it would mean being in town more, maintaining our pretense more actively." Sam considered this, his expression thoughtful. "It's your decision, Tess, but if teaching would make you happy, you should accept. We can manage the other complications." His easy support touched her deeply. The old Sam might have worried about what people would think, might have calculated how her decision affected their charade. This Sam simply wanted what was best for her. "I'll write to Miss Holcomb tomorrow," she decided. "Thank you," he smiled, that warm, genuine smile she'd come to treasure. "No need to thank me. It's your life, Tess. I'm just fortunate to be part of it." Something shifted between them in that moment, a subtle change in the atmosphere, a lowering of the careful guards they'd maintained. Theresa felt it like a physical current, saw the awareness of it reflected in Sam's eyes. "Sam," she began, uncertain what she meant to say but needing to acknowledge the moment. "I should check on that new calf," he said abruptly, rising from the table. "The one born yesterday, make sure it's nursing properly." She nodded, both disappointed and relieved by his retreat. They were moving toward something she knew had been since that night of honesty after Willard's intrusion. But neither seemed quite ready to name it, to take the final step from pretense to reality. Later that week, Theresa accompanied Sam to town to mail her acceptance letter to Miss Holcomb and purchase supplies. It was their first public appearance together since the social, and she was acutely aware of curious eyes following them along Palisade's Main Street. "Mrs. Easton," Martha Miller greeted her warmly outside the general store. "How lovely to see you. We've missed you at the Ladies' Aid meetings." "I've been quite busy at the ranch," Theresa explained, accepting the older woman's embrace, "but I hope to be more involved soon. I'll be taking over Miss Holcomb's position at the school this fall." Martha clapped her hands in delight. "Wonderful news. The children will benefit enormously from your experience, and it will give you a chance to become more integrated into the community." She glanced at Sam, who was loading supplies into their wagon. "Though I imagine your husband will miss having you at home all day." Theresa smiled, the lie now practiced enough to come easily. "He's been very supportive. Triple Creek will always be our home, but I need to use my training as well." "Of course, dear, a modern marriage should allow for a woman's talents." Martha patted her arm. "Speaking of which, the Harvest Festival Committee is meeting next Tuesday. We would love your input, especially since you'll be working with the schoolchildren who always perform." "I'd be delighted," Theresa agreed, genuinely pleased at the invitation. As they continued down the street toward the post office, Theresa realized how easily she had fallen into her role as Mrs. Easton. It no longer felt like a performance, but simply another facet of her life. The realization was both comforting and unsettling. "You seem troubled," Sam observed as they left the post office. "Not troubled exactly." She adjusted her bonnet against the bright Wyoming sun. "Just thinking about how naturally this deception has become, sometimes I almost forget it isn't real." A shadow crossed his face. "Does that bother you? I'm not sure," she admitted. "I worry that the longer we maintain this pretense, the harder it will be to move forward, whatever that might mean," he nodded, understanding her meaning without requiring elaboration. "Perhaps we should discuss Samuel Easton." A booming voice interrupted their conversation. Sheriff Rollins approached from across the street, his silver mustache catching the sunlight. "Just the man I was hoping to see." Sam touched the brim of his hat in greeting. Sheriff. Is there news about Willard? That's what I wanted to tell you. Judge finally arrived yesterday, held court this morning. Willard's been sentenced to 6 months for breaking and entering plus a fine for the forgery. The sheriff nodded to Theresa. Mrs. Easton, you'll be pleased to know he won't be troubling you again. Judge also ordered him to stay clear of you both once he's served his time. Relief washed through Theresa. Thank you, Sheriff. That's welcome news indeed. Well deserved, Rollins asserted. Man had no business harassing a respectable married woman. He tipped his hat to them both. You folks have a good day now. As the sheriff ambled away, Theresa and Sam exchanged a look filled with unspoken understanding. With Willard's sentencing, the immediate threat that had necessitated their charade was removed. The decision of how to proceed was now entirely their own. We should finish our errands, Sam said, offering her his arm. Martha Miller just went into the mercantile, and I'd wager she's already telling everyone about your new teaching position. Theresa accepted his arm, noting how natural the gesture had become. You're probably right, we'll talk more at home. The word slipped out unconsciously, yet it was true. Triple Creek had become home in a way her Boston lodgings never had been. The question now was whether that home included Sam in the way they both were beginning to want, but had yet to acknowledge openly. The answer would have to wait until they were alone, away from Palisade's curious eyes, and ready to face whatever truth lay between them, whether that meant continuing their pretense indefinitely, ending it completely, or transforming it into something genuine at last. I can't believe school starts in just 3 weeks, Theresa remarked as she and Sam sat on the porch that evening, watching the sun sink behind the distant mountains. The late August air was still warm, but held the first hint of autumn's approach. The children are fortunate to have you, Sam replied, his chair tilted back against the house wall. Though I must admit I've grown accustomed to having you here at the ranch all day, she smiled, touched by the admission. I'll still be here mornings and evenings and weekends. The schoolhouse is only a 20-minute ride. I know. He gazed out at the golden light washing over his land. It's a good change, Tess. You're too talented to spend your days just keeping house and managing my accounts. Our accounts, she corrected automatically, then caught herself. I mean, no, you're right, our accounts. He set his chair back on all 4 legs and turned to face her directly, which brings us to what we've been avoiding discussing since returning from town. Theresa's heart quickened. Willard's sentencing. Yes, Sam's blue eyes held her steadily. The immediate reason for our arrangement is gone. You're established in the community now, respected. You have employment beginning soon. You could continue living here as my cousin or find your own lodgings in town near the school. Is that what you want? She asked, echoing the question she'd posed a month earlier after discovering her father's letter. No, he answered just as he had then, but with even greater certainty. What I want, Tess, hasn't changed, but what I need to know is what you want. Theresa looked out at Triple Creek, spread before them the pastures where cattle grazed peacefully, the creek glinting silver in the fading light, the barn and corrals Sam had built with his own hands. Then she looked at the man beside her, his face serious but open, waiting for her answer with the same patient strength he'd shown since the day they met. In that moment, the truth she'd been avoiding acknowledging fully became crystal clear. I want to stay, she said softly. Not as your pretend wife or as your distant cousin, but as myself. Because these past months have shown me what my life could be, what our life could be together. She had deliberately echoed his words from that night after Willard's intrusion, and she saw recognition dawn in his eyes, followed by something deeper, warmer. Are you saying? He began, hope and caution warring in his voice. I'm saying that I've fallen in love with you, Samuel Easton. Not with our arrangement or with Triple Creek, though I've grown to love those too, but with you, your honesty, your strength, your kindness. She took a deep breath, her heart pounding. I'm saying that if you still want to make our marriage real, I would be honored to truly become your wife. For a moment, he sat perfectly still, as if afraid any movement might shatter the moment. Then he reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand in his. Tess, he said, his voice rough with emotion, I've loved you since before I knew what to call the feeling. Since watching you stand tall before Hargrove that first day, since seeing you tackle ranch life with more courage than most men I know, since every evening by the fire when you've corrected my sloppy bookkeeping." A laugh escaped her, half joy and half relief. "Your bookkeeping is atrocious." "Fortunately, my taste in women is considerably better." His smile faded into seriousness. "Are you certain, Tess? I know our beginning was unconventional. I wouldn't want you to feel obligated by our arrangement or by your father's letter." Or she silenced him by rising from her chair and closing the distance between them, bending to press her lips gently against his. It was their first kiss, and though brief, it left them both breathless when she pulled away. "Does that feel like obligation to you?" she asked softly. In answer, he stood and drew her back to him, one hand cupping her face with exquisite tenderness. This kiss was deeper, a promise and a beginning wrapped together. When they finally parted, Theresa felt as though something that had been slightly askew in the world had finally settled into its proper place. "We should do this properly," Sam said, his arms still around her waist. "A real ceremony with the whole town present. No more secrets, no more pretending." "What will people think when they learn we weren't actually married all this time?" Theresa wondered. "That we're unconventional," he replied with a small smile, "but I think they'll understand. After all, the important part is true. I did claim you as my wife that very first day, and I meant it with all my heart, even if I didn't realize it yet." She rested her head against his chest, hearing the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. "From mail-order bride scorned to rancher's wife, not the journey I expected when I left Boston. A much better one, I hope," he murmured into her hair. "The best possible one," she assured him, lifting her face for another kiss as the last light of day painted Triple Creek in shades of gold and promise. 2 weeks later, Theresa stood in Martha Miller's spare bedroom, staring at her reflection in the polished mirror. The dress was simple but lovely cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs, sewn by the women of the Ladies' Aid Society as a gift when they learned of the upcoming renewal of vows. That was how Sam had explained it to the town, that they wished to publicly reaffirm their commitment before Theresa began her teaching position. Only Pastor Donovan knew the full truth, that this would be their actual wedding, not a renewal. The kindly clergyman had been understanding, recognizing the unusual circumstances that had brought them together. "You look beautiful," Martha said, adjusting the small wreath of wildflowers in Theresa's hair. "Samuel won't know what hit him." Theresa smiled nervously. "I hope everyone doesn't think this is foolish, having a ceremony when we're supposedly already married." "Nonsense. It's romantic," Martha declared. "Besides, you missed out on a proper wedding the first time, eloping as you did. The town is delighted to celebrate with you now." A knock at the door heralded Tom Miller's arrival. "Ladies, it's time. Everyone's gathered at the church." Theresa took a deep breath, gathering her bouquet of late summer flowers. "Ready," she said, with far more confidence than she had felt that day on the stagecoach, arriving in a strange town with nothing but uncertainty before her. The small church was filled to capacity, the entire population of Palisade turning out to witness the renewal of their most unexpected marriage. Sunlight streamed through the simple stained glass windows, illuminating the wooden pews where townsfolk sat in their Sunday best, smiling as Theresa walked down the aisle on Tom Miller's arm. And at the altar stood Sam, more handsome than she had ever seen him in a new suit, his face alight with a joy so pure it brought tears to her eyes. This was no performance for the town's benefit. This was real, the love in his eyes, the slight trembling of his hands as she reached him, the soft, "You're beautiful," he whispered as she took her place beside him. Pastor Donovan's words washed over her as he spoke of commitment, partnership, and love that grows stronger through adversity. When the time came to exchange rings, simple gold bands Sam had purchased on a trip to Cheyenne, Theresa's voice was clear and unwavering as she repeated her vows. "I, Theresa Jordan, take you, Samuel Easton, to be my lawfully wedded husband." The words that had once been a deception were now her deepest truth. As Sam slipped the ring onto her finger, his hand steady and sure, she knew without doubt that the journey that had begun in heartbreak and pretense had led her exactly where she was meant to be. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Pastor Donovan declared, his eyes twinkling with the secret knowledge that these words made official what the town believed had been true for months. "You may kiss your bride." Sam drew her close, his kiss reverent yet filled with promise. The church erupted in cheers and applause, genuinely happy for the couple many had come to respect and admire. The celebration continued at the town hall, where tables groaned with food contributed by every family in Palisade. There was dancing and laughter, toasts and well wishes. Even Vernon Hargrove approached to offer congratulations, though Theresa noted with satisfaction that he seemed distinctly uncomfortable when Sam mentioned their upcoming meeting to review the mercantile's account balance. As the afternoon progressed, Sam found Theresa by the punch bowl, drawing her away from the crowd for a moment of privacy. "Happy, Mrs. Easton?" he asked, his voice tender. "Completely, Mr. Easton." She smiled up at him, the name no longer a pretense but her true identity. "Though I'm looking forward to going home." "Home," he repeated, the word holding all the meaning they both felt, "to Triple Creek, to our life together." "Speaking of which," she said, a hint of mischief in her eyes, "I've been thinking about that north pasture you've been wanting to expand. I believe if we adjust the irrigation system, we could increase the grazing area by nearly 20 acres. Sam laughed, the sound rich with happiness. "You're discussing ranch management on our wedding day?" "Well, it is our ranch," she pointed out, "our future. And I've been reading about some innovative techniques they're using in Colorado." He silenced her with a kiss, heedless of the knowing looks from nearby townsfolk. "I love you, Theresa Easton," he murmured when they parted. "Your brilliant mind, your endless plans, your courage, everything about you." "And I love you," she replied simply, the words still new enough to send a thrill through her. "More than I ever thought possible when I stepped off that stagecoach." As they rejoined the celebration, accepting congratulations and sharing dances with friends and neighbors, Theresa marveled at the twisted path that had brought her to this moment. She had come to Wyoming as a mail-order bride, scorned, heartbroken, and uncertain. She had been claimed as a wife by a stranger's declaration, entered into a marriage of convenience and deception, and discovered truth and love in the most unexpected of places. Now, surrounded by community and secure in Sam's love, she was no longer pretending. She was truly Mrs. Easton of Triple Creek Ranch, teacher, accountant, rancher's wife, and partner in all things. The future stretched before them like the vast Wyoming sky, full of promise and possibility. And it had all begun with those simple words, spoken with quiet pride by a man who would become her heart's true home. "She is my wife." 5 years later, Theresa stood on the porch of Triple Creek Ranch, watching the wagon approach through the golden haze of a late summer afternoon. Her hand rested unconsciously on her swollen belly, where their second child was making its presence known with enthusiastic kicks. "They're here," she called over her shoulder into the house. "Sam, Benjamin, Papa's home with Grandma." 3-year-old Benjamin came rushing out, his dark hair so like his father's tousled from his afternoon nap. "Papa," he shouted, bouncing with excitement. Sam appeared behind them, wiping his hands on a towel. "Just in time, the roast is nearly done." Theresa smiled at him, still feeling the same flutter in her heart she'd felt on their wedding day. 5 years of marriage had only deepened their bond, through drought seasons and bountiful ones, through the joy of Benjamin's birth and the heartbreak of a miscarriage the following year. Through it all, their partnership had remained strong, their love a steady foundation for the life they'd built together. The wagon drew closer, and Theresa could make out Sam's mother, Margaret Easton, seated beside Tom Miller, who was driving. She had first visited 3 years ago, shortly after Benjamin was born, and had returned each summer since. This visit was special. She'd be staying through the winter to help after the new baby arrived in October. "Down," Benjamin demanded, squirming in Sam's arms as the wagon pulled up. "Patience, son," Sam laughed, but set the boy down to run toward his grandmother as Tom helped her descend. "There's my little cowboy," Margaret exclaimed, kneeling despite her 60 years to catch Benjamin in a hug. "My, how you've grown." Theresa moved forward to embrace her mother-in-law. "Welcome back to Triple Creek, Margaret. Your timing is perfect any later, and I'm afraid I'd be too large to move." Margaret patted Theresa's belly affectionately. "Nonsense. You're carrying beautifully." She turned to hug her son. "Samuel, the north pasture looks wonderful." I could see the new irrigation system from the road. Tess's design, Sam said proudly, increased our yield by 30% last season. I'm not surprised. Margaret's eyes twinkled. When you wrote about marrying a schoolteacher, I never imagined she'd revolutionize ranching techniques as well. They moved inside, where the aroma of roasting beef and apple pie filled the expanded kitchen. The house had grown along with their family, a new wing added 2 years ago to accommodate Benjamin's nursery and Margaret's visits. The porch widened to provide more space for summer evenings. A proper study created from what had once been the blue room, where Theresa had first stayed. Over dinner, Margaret shared news from Pennsylvania, while Tom discussed the latest cattle prices before taking his leave to return to his own cabin. After Benjamin was tucked into bed with stories from his grandmother, the adults settled in the comfortable sitting room. I saw George Willard in Cheyenne, Margaret mentioned, accepting a cup of tea from Theresa. Working as a clerk in a mercantile there. Did he recognize you? Sam asked, his expression neutral. No, but I recognized him from your descriptions. He looked quite diminished, nothing like the threatening figure you described. She sipped her tea thoughtfully. It's strange to think that without his cruelty, you two might never have found each other. Theresa exchanged a glance with Sam. It wasn't the beginning I imagined when I left Boston, she admitted, but I wouldn't change it now. Everything, even the difficult parts, led us here. Speaking of beginnings, Margaret said, setting down her cup, I brought something I thought you might want. She retrieved a small package from her bag and handed it to Theresa. I found it among some old family papers. Curious, Theresa unwrapped the package to reveal a daguerreotype in a simple frame. The image showed a young couple, the woman seated while the man stood behind her, his hand resting on her shoulder. My parents, Theresa whispered, recognizing her father's features though he was much younger than in her memories. Where did you get this? It was taken at their wedding, Margaret explained. Your father sent a copy to his cousin, my father, who had been unable to attend due to illness. When I told Papa about your marriage to Samuel, he remembered having it and wanted you to have it. Tears pricked Theresa's eyes as she traced the image with gentle fingers. Thank you, this is precious to me. She looked up at Sam. Our children will know their grandparents' faces now. Sam moved to sit beside her on the settee, his arm encircling her shoulders. Your father would be proud of the life you've built, Tess. Our life, she corrected, leaning into his embrace. One I never could have imagined when I stepped off that stagecoach, humiliated and alone. Not alone for long, Sam reminded her, pressing a kiss to her temple. No, she agreed, smiling at the memory. Not once a certain stubborn rancher announced to the entire town that I was his wife, Margaret chuckled. I still can't believe you maintained that pretense for months, and to think now you're the most respected couple in Palisade. It was true. Theresa's position as teacher had evolved into being named school superintendent last year, overseeing the expansion to a 2-room schoolhouse with an assistant teacher. Sam had been elected to the town council, his fair-mindedness and progressive ideas earning him the respect of ranchers and merchants alike. Together, they had helped establish Palisade's first lending library, contributed to the new hospital fund, and hosted the annual Harvest Festival at Triple Creek for the past 3 years. Life has a way of surprising you, Theresa mused, her hand finding Sam's. If someone had told me 6 years ago that being abandoned by my intended husband would lead to true love, motherhood, and the happiest years of my life, I would never have believed them. Later that night, after Margaret had retired to her room and the house was quiet save for the soft ticking of the grandfather clock Sam had given Theresa for their 3rd anniversary, they stood together on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the vast Wyoming sky. What are you thinking? Sam asked, his arms wrapped around her from behind, his hands resting protectively over their unborn child. I was remembering something my father once told me, she replied, leaning back against his solid warmth. He said that life rarely takes you where you expect to go, but often takes you exactly where you need to be. Wise man, your father, Sam's voice was thoughtful. I wish I'd had the chance to know him. He would have liked you, Theresa said with certainty. He valued honesty, hard work, and kindness above all else, just like you, just like us, Sam corrected gently. Those are the values we're teaching Benjamin and this little one. He caressed her belly as the baby kicked against his hand. Theresa turned in his arms to face him, her expression serious in the silver moonlight. "I never properly thanked you, you know." "For what?" he asked, puzzled. "For claiming me that day. For announcing to everyone that I was your wife when you had no obligation to do so." "It was the most gallant thing anyone has ever done for me," Sam smiled, the lines at the corners of his eyes crinkling in the way she loved. "It was also the smartest thing I ever did, even if I didn't realize it at the time." He brushed a strand of hair from her face tenderly. "I love you, Tess Easton, more today than yesterday, and not as much as I will tomorrow." "And I love you," she whispered, rising on tiptoe to kiss him, her heart full to bursting with gratitude for this man, this life, this love that had begun with a declaration born of chivalry and grown into the deepest truth of her existence. As they stood embraced beneath the vast canopy of stars, Theresa thought of all the twists and turns that had brought them to this moment, from a scorned mail-order bride and a rancher's impulsive claim, through deception and revelation, to the profound partnership they now shared. Their story wasn't conventional, but it was theirs, woven with threads of courage, honesty, and a love that had transformed them both. Inside the house that had become their home, Benjamin slept peacefully, while Margaret's gentle snores drifted from the guest room. The new baby stirred beneath Theresa's heart, a promise of further joy to come. And here on the porch of Triple Creek Ranch, in the circle of her husband's arms, Theresa Jordan Easton knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true place in the world, not where she had expected to be, but exactly where she was always meant to find herself.